According to my friends at the World Economic Forum, consistent and reliable employment for autistic individuals continues to be a thorny and persistent challenge. The reporting suggests that only between 22 and 32% of autistic adults were regularly engaged in consistent and persistent employment, while up to 85% either experienced unemployment or complete non-employment. Even among those who were employed, many felt that they were unutilized, and nearly half reported that they were working in positions below their qualifications and capabilities. In this important episode of Let's Have This Conversation, I sit down with my friend April Ratchford. She is an autistic occupational therapist, global podcaster, an inclusion advocate, and the award-winning host of the podcast Adulting with Autism, which has amassed more than 2.7 million downloads over the lifespan of the project. Drawing on both her lived experience as an autistic adult and professional expertise, April provides valuable insight on the realities that autistic individuals face in the world of work, society at large, mental health, societal inclusion, and isolation. What began as advocacy for her son has evolved into a global movement and mission to empower autistic adults, while also challenging the systems which often present challenges and barriers towards success. During our conversation, we explore why the employment rates for autistic adults remain disproportionately low, the impact of autistic unemployment and overlooked talent, how organizations can build truly inclusive and diverse hiring and retention practices, the role of self-advocacy, identity, belonging, and the role it plays in achieving professional success, practical strategies for increasing workforce participation and societal inclusion for autistic individuals, and finally, the steps that society can take to move beyond awareness and move towards meaningful inclusion. And Ratchford joined me this week to tell me more. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. April, if you're ready, I'll take a moment to welcome you to the program, and I'm super excited to learn all about your advocacy efforts for adults with autism. It's great to see you, and happy Friday to you, my friend.
Happy Friday to you. I'm ready.
Absolutely. So, April, I know that you hold multiple hats. I know you're a global podcaster, you're an autistic occupational therapist, you have autism yourself, and you're really trying to make a very big imprint on the world. I know that you have your fingerprints of difference all over this world, my friend. So I'm wondering if you can tell me about your story and what makes you so fabulous, my friend.
So, what makes me so fabulous is generally I do carry a lot of hats. I am an autistic occupational therapist. I'm an autistic mom. I have an autistic son, and I created the podcast for him because when he tried to transition from high school to adulthood, there was nothing for him. So I started the podcast because I didn't want other parents feeling like we did, feeling lost, hopeless, and trying to get the word out that just because they turn into young adults doesn't mean they still don't need our help.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I live with cerebral palsy myself, and I always tell employers when I have a chance to speak with them that there's no 50% off policy when you have a disability, right? It's not like you can return it to the department store, right?
Correct.
Yeah, absolutely. So, April, tell me about the podcast because I know it's amassed over 2.7 million downloads over the lifespan of the podcast. I know it's called Adulting with Autism, and it's really making a mark in the podcasting space. So, tell me all about the show, my friend.
So the podcast is basically I bring in specialists, I bring in clinicians, I bring in other adults with autism that may run their own business, and I have them on the show to ask them questions, whether it's a mental health, whether it's relationship, whether it's intimacy, whether it's a business question, whether it's coaching. So everybody has that option because there's nothing really out there for autistic young adults. It's just very basic clinician stuff. And this is for them, not us.
Yeah, it's important to always keep the needle of knowledge moving forward, isn't it?
Correct.
Absolutely. And April, tell me, how do you think inclusion and acceptance are interconnected, my friend?
Oh, so inclusion is just being human. Don't isolate somebody because they're different. So welcome everybody's differences and just include them. If you don't know about something, ask.
Hmm.
Don't assume.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that you bring a unique blend of lived experience and clinical expertise to a very interesting field. And I know that we'll both appreciate the fact that you're a direct communicator when it comes to this sort of thing. And I'm curious, how has this combination of lived and professional expertise, how has it shaped the way you support autistic adults and look at attacking life each and every day, my friend? What are your thoughts?
So, being an autistic occupational therapist, late diagnosed, opened a lot of doors for me of why I did the things I did and why I do the things I do at work. And I try to combine both of it because I try to tell people listen, you can't expect people to mask and bend every day
Mm-hmm.
to their expectations. So I try to teach what I know to my coworkers because I stim. People think she must not stim at work. I absolutely do. I spin in a chair or I roll across the therapy floor when I get overwhelmed. And, we need to make this more, I hate to say normal, but understand that just because we're in a profession that you don't typically see stimming in doesn't mean you can't accept it.
Yeah, absolutely. And April, I know a big part of your work focuses on things like promoting independence, identity, and workplace inclusion and mental health. All areas where people may feel, overwhelmed or undersupported. So I'm curious, when you look at what that means in practice, what are you seeing on the ground that many people need to understand, my friend. What are your thoughts there?
What I want people to understand is just because they're 18 and older
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean they have to leave home. Some people are just not ready. And you don't have to be on anybody else's timetable but your own. And I try to tell like young adults, you're not going to get it right. You're going to mess up. That is what your 20s is for, is to mess up. And that those that want independence, you have to figure out what independence means to you. Is it living by yourself? Is it doing ADLs on your own? Is it getting a job? Is it moving out from your parents' home or your caregivers? It's what they want, not what parents want, clinicians. It's for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And, April, I'm also curious to ask you about removing attitudinal barriers and what employers need to know about the positive benefits of hiring folks with disabilities. Because I talk to organizations all the time and they tell me, Kevin, I want to hire people with disabilities, but I just don't know where to start, or this is going to take too much of my time and energy, and I always tell them that it's a competitive advantage to hire folks with disabilities because they're natural problem solvers. So I'm curious to ask you, what attitudinal barriers do you think employers need to work to eliminate or eradicate so people with autism and other people with disabilities have a fair shot at the world of work? What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Um, what businesses need to know is that don't fit them in a box.
Mm-hmm.
They're never going to be like you, they're never going to be like their peers, but hone in on their strengths. Now, can we be very direct? Absolutely. I have been fired for being too direct.
Mm-hmm.
So, education is the best thing, and it's going to have to come from both sides because you can't walk into a place of employment and demand all these accommodations, whereas businesses need to open up of if they can do the job, can they do the job at home if that's better? Can they do the job wearing headphones if they don't need to have any sound? Make it a common. I mean, we're in the age of after COVID where a lot of performance is on computer, online. Why should they have to go into an office when you can make it an online process?
Yeah, absolutely. And when we talk about inclusion, what are you? Because I know that you live in the States and I live in Canada, and right now, diversity, equity, and inclusion is going under something I like to call an extreme makeover at the moment in the States. So, what do you think of the current perception of diversity, equity, and inclusion is getting wrong, my friend? What are your thoughts there?
Inclusion and equity and disability, you can't fit it into one little nice paragraph. That's not going to work for inclusion. But you also can't make it so big and so big that people don't understand what it means.
Yeah.
So for us down here in the States that's about to, we don't ever know what's going to happen. We have to understand that if you would like the country to run efficiently, perhaps you should probably think to hire people that have disabilities, that can do the interviews. Open yourself outside the box. Do you necessarily have to hide the questions for the interview process? Absolutely not. Give them the chance to look at the interview and let them show you how great they really are.
Yeah, absolutely. And, going through having occupational therapists my entire life as well. I know that my occupational therapist really helped me to achieve, personal independence and my own sense of identity. So I'm curious for you, when you work with people as an occupational therapist, what sense of a pride or accomplishment do you take when you help people discover their own identity, passion, and purpose, my friend? What are your thoughts there?
Actually, if I always think if I can help one person in the world, then I've done my job, because you're not always going to hit all your goals for people, and that's just life. But if I can get them close enough to where they are pursuing the things that they want to pursue, if even if I have to modify the environment or how they get dressed or help them think how to be out in the community, that's a win-win for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, I'm curious to ask, because when I think of diversity, equity, and inclusion, the word that comes to mind for me is possibility. So I'm curious to ask you your thoughts on the word of possibility and how it is interconnected to the word, to the concept of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how it can help others define their own, what I call, portrait of success. What are your thoughts there?
So possibility to me means the sky's the limit. You're not going to limit yourself, and why should you? You and other people should be able to achieve goals that you set. And
Mm-hmm.
my job is to help you set those goals and achieve them to the best of my ability. What businesses and people need to understand with inclusion and disability is that you're limiting people that could be taking your business to the next level. If you would just sit down, lay out what you need for them to do, clear steps. If they can do it, let them do it.
Yeah,
Don't sit there and just don't sit there and say, "Here, just do all this," and then change your mind. That doesn't work.
no, it certainly doesn't. And, I want to return to something I asked you about earlier about people with disabilities of all times being natural problem solvers. I think they're leaders in the space of innovation. So I'm curious to ask you about how you think people with disabilities are natural problem solvers by nature, and what that can offer to organizations.
So, people with disabilities have been problem solving since they were born.
Yeah.
That's a given. They've had to problem solve how to get through school, how to make friends, how to get dressed, social cues. It's constant problem solving that neurotypical people don't think about every day. But everybody else has to think, how am I going to get through this section of my life independently? So, what businesses need to understand is you guys are the natural problem solvers, and you don't stop and you don't give up until you find the answer. And you always think out of the box.
Yeah.
So that's my
Yeah.
thing.
Absolutely. And April, I'm curious to ask you about your own personal journey, because I know that you have experienced quite the journey in life, my friend. I know that you were divorced twice, and I know that by 26 you were raising a son with spina bifida. By 29, you found your mother who was deceased or passed away, and in your 30s you were fighting to get autism services while being told your own son wasn't autistic, you also survived, as I said, a divorce twice, homelessness, and job loss, and you also failed your OT board by one question, my friend. So tell me about your own personal view on resilience and how those experiences have shaped you into the person that you are today, my friend.
So those experiences, I feel like, make me who I am and make me a better advocate because yes, I failed. I have failed a lot, but it doesn't mean my story was over. And it
Mm-hmm.
just built the resilience. Like you're going to have devastating things in your life, and you have two choices. You can wallow in your failure,
Mm-hmm.
or you can take it and say, I'm not going to take this anymore. I'm going to pivot and do something else.
Yeah, absolutely. I always say that we all have a life compass, and it's incumbent upon all of us to sort of point it in the direction that we want it to go. Right?
Correct.
Yeah, absolutely. And I am curious to ask you because I know that you're on a mission to help the world better understand neurodivergent adulthood. And I'm curious, what does that mission look like for you from a day-to-day perspective? What do you want to share with me in that regard?
That just because we're adults don't mean we're not neurodiverse. Sure, we look like everyday people, but we have sensory issues. We have times where we melt down like adults. We think very fast. We like problem solving. The world just needs to understand just because we turned into adults doesn't mean our disability just went away.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish.
And that I want everybody to understand that you can achieve so much just by working together versus splitting everything apart.
I used to work for the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, and one of the sayings in my office was that we can get more done if we collaborate together, right?
Right.
Absolutely. And, April, living with a disability myself and you living with one as well, a lot of people look at people with disabilities, and I know that people have told me that I'm an inspiration, and I certainly appreciate the compliment, but I always tell people I'm just living my life, and if I'm an inspiration to people, that's great. So I'm curious to ask you about the word inspiration, the concept of inspiration, how you view it on a more broader scale, and how does it apply to the work you do and the life you live, my friend?
Oh, that's a big question.
Yeah.
So, me myself, I don't ever think I'm an inspiration. I think I'm doing my due diligence as an occupational therapist. I saw a gap that needed to be fixed, and no one else was doing it. And I was like, I'm going to fix this gap. But if I can inspire others to be themselves, to go for their dreams, to ask for help, then I've done my job.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, April, I'm also curious to ask you about authenticity and the real world tools that people need to understand when we're distinguishing between authenticity, clarity, and actually giving people the real world tools to make a difference. So, how do you think authenticity and clarity are intertwined connected to creating an inclusive society. What are your thoughts there?
So this is my own opinion, but
Sure.
when you when you go to work and they say we want you to be your authentic self, that's a lie. They want you to fit into their copy of the workforce. So authenticity means you don't have to mask. You don't have to fit in anybody's box. You can say what you want. You can do the things that you normally do without having to hide. So to live authentically is difficult because the world doesn't want us to live authentically, but we're
Mhm.
told to do this every single day.
Yes, we are.
And for clarity, it becomes muddled, especially when you're a kid coming through and everything is like be your authentic self, and then they hit the real world. It's confusing.
Mhm.
Don't confuse people. And I call it inspo porn, like where people are like, "Oh, rejection is redirection," and I'm like, "What does that mean? That means nothing. We don't understand that. We want you to give us concrete answers to how we can contribute to the world authentically."
Yeah, and April, I'm also curious to ask you about the whole concept of building a community of collaborative advocates. Because when you have a disability, it's an all hands on deck sort of approach throughout the duration of your life, based on necessity and in regular practice. So, what do you think building a collaborative community look like in practice, when we're hoping to have individuals with disabilities to reach their fullest potential once they enter adulthood as well? What are your thoughts there?
I feel like a lot of families get left behind as their kids with disabilities grow older. And we need to stop that because the community is what makes people stronger. It becomes a family, it becomes a sounding board. So we need to carry that forward and help people understand just because you're getting older doesn't mean you don't need community.
Mm-hmm.
And community is out there. It may be online versus in person, but there is community everywhere. You just have to search for it.
Yeah, and from your perspective, from an employment perspective, I'm curious what frustrates you the most about the lack of people with disabilities, whether they have autism or not. Because if you look at the numbers, people with disabilities are disproportionately unemployed, and those with non-disabilities are fully employed nearly by a 2-to-1 margin. So I'm curious, what frustrates you the most when it comes to the employment inequity for people with disabilities, and what gives you the most hope, my friend?
What frustrates me the most is people who have stereotypes.
Mm-hmm.
And a good portion of businesses still have the stereotype of what people should look like, how they should act when they are doing their job. The other thing that frustrates me is if you're such a great business, why don't your directions state things clearly instead of muddling everything? It is confusing to me why you think a business would be so great or your business would be so great if you can't clearly state directions to make a job easier.
Mm-hmm.
And I forgot the second part of the question.
No, it was just about how we can make workplaces more inclusive and more welcoming for folks with disabilities. So let me ask the question this way: how do you think we can rethink recruitment practices to better employ folks with disabilities? Because I always say it's important to fit the job to the person rather than fitting the person to the job, and looking at how the skill sets of people with disabilities can be a competitive advantage for an organization. So I'm curious, how do you think we can rethink the hiring and recruitment process for folks with disabilities?
Think of their skills first.
Yeah.
Their strengths are what make them unique and great. So if you can interview people based on their skill set, then we have a better chance of employing more people with disabilities. But if you businesses continue to sit there and be vague and judgmental about how their hiring practice is, then we're going to remain like this for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not fair, especially when, people are on disability. That's not livable.
No, it's not.
When they can get jobs out there and make a living wage. And some of them could be six-figure entrepreneurs, but no one gave them the tools to say, I can do this. We always say, oh, you can get on disability. I mean, you can, but it ain't going to be great.
I know. And especially in the States, they keep taking it away.
Correct. There's a big issue in the state of Kentucky now where they want to cut funding. And I'm like,
Well, just because you cut funding doesn't mean the disabilities magically disappear.
exactly.
April, I'm also curious to ask you your opinion on, the ordinary steps people can take if they're not in government or business, but they're really passionate about this subject. What do you think ordinary people can do to be their best self-supporting advocate for folks with disabilities? What are your thoughts there?
My thoughts are ask more questions.
Yeah.
Don't assume. And don't assume they need your help. Ask what they need. Be a support, but don't sit there and be a hindrance at the same time. Respect people with disabilities. They know who they are, they know what they can do.
Mm-hmm.
Ask them. Ask them, how can I better serve you?
Yeah, absolutely. And what are your thoughts on the concept of disability prosperity and societal inclusion in the concept of disability prosperity? And how do you think we can break down the barriers for societal inclusion? We've talked a lot about employment, but I know because I've dealt with this myself. Sometimes having a disability, you go through social isolation and societal isolation as well. So how do you think we can work to break down the barriers to social and societal inclusion as well?
We need to stop isolating people
Yeah.
because we tend to think, okay, they're adults or they have family, it's fine. It's not fine. You need to tell them, hey, there's people out here who can help. It's a lack of knowledge and a lack of communication between, I think, people with disabilities and the world out there
Mm-hmm.
because they're still stuck in 1967. So
Yeah.
we need to speed them along and be like, listen, they can do jobs. They're very intelligent. We can modify things. That's what my job is for. If you don't know how to modify it, hire an OT.
Yes,
We'll help you
indeed.
out.
That's in the job description for sure. And April, I combine my last two questions because they're connected. And I'm curious to get your perspective on the whole notion of self reflection and empowerment of folks with disabilities, and how big, because I know for myself, self reflection and quiet time and the ability to process is very important. So tell me the role that self reflection, resilience, and sort of knowing your own value has placed in your life. And then lastly, I'm curious about asking you about your own personal and professional legacy and how you want that to be defined, my friend.
So, self reflection for me is looking back on my life and seeing what I could have done better, but what I've seen that I've done, then I can sit and make the world a better place.
Mm-hmm.
And my legacy is that I leave adulting with autism for that one autistic person or ADHD person who has no supports. They can find my podcast and feel like I see them.
Yeah, representation matters, doesn't it?
It does.
Absolutely. And just as a follow up, what does that concept of representation matters mean in practice to you, my friend? What does that concept mean to you?
That means every person with a disability is different, not just grouped in to cerebral palsy or autism or ADHD or whatever you have. It's one person with that disability, just like neurotypical people have individuality, so do we.
Yeah, absolutely. And finally, April, tell me if people want to get connected with adulting with autism or yourself personally, what's the best way they can do that?
So you can go to my website, adultingwithautism.com, and get a hold of me. It has all my socials, it has my merch shop, it has resources, and I'm my podcast 3 times a week on everywhere that a podcast is blasted.
Yeah, well, I've hosted this show for over 6.5 years now, and I've done over 1,200 episodes. So I know the dedication it takes to be a consistent podcaster. And just as one final follow up, I know that you've amassed, as I said earlier, 2.7 million, more than 2.7 million downloads throughout the duration of your podcast. So, what do you think goes into being not only a successful podcaster, but an authentic one as well? Because there's a difference between being a consistent podcaster with boring content versus being an authentic one. So, what do you think goes into producing an authentically successful and thought-provoking podcast, my friend? What are your thoughts there?
When you're creating your podcast, you create it for one person. Don't think about the masses. Who are you creating this for? Because if one person listens, then there's other people out there that will listen. If you feel like you have to hide yourself, then that's not authentic. Everybody can hear the inauthentic, being inauthentic.
Mm-hmm.
Just get out there and go to the one person you want to hear this and start.
We can all build our own community one podcast at a time for sure. But April, I really commend the good work that you're doing to promote inclusion in both society and the workplace. And it was a real privilege and an honor to talk to you this afternoon. And I want to thank you for being here and engaging in conversation and being so vulnerable. It's most appreciated, my friend.
Thank you so much. It was an honor to be on your podcast.